Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to SOFREP Radio. I'm your host this afternoon, Steve Balestrieri. Joining us right now, we have a very special guest with us, Tom Spooner, former Delta Force, 7th Special Forces Group, which is always partial to my heart there. He did 21 years in the military. And then after he was out, he had problems with a lot of veterans do with PTS, TBI, and he started he was co-founder, I should say, Warrior's Heart, and it's called warriorsheart.com. It's a ranch located in Bandera, Texas, just outside of San Antonio, and we're going to talk to him all about all of this stuff. But before we go any further, let's bring him on to the podcast. Tom, thanks for taking the time with us this afternoon. We're a military podcast, so everyone loves hearing everyone's bio. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your military career?
Yes, I'll try to do as short a version as possible, and then we can dive into whatever parts you'd like to. So I came in the military in 1990. I was at basic training, and right when I was at basic training, the Gulf War kicked off. And the funny story was, I told my would-be wife at the time, that there's nothing going on in the military. She was all worried about going to war. It never happened. It hadn't happened in years. And then when I was at basic, it kicked off. So went to basic AIT, jump school, and straight to the 82nd. And then was there a couple of months, and then over to the Gulf. So from 90 to 95, I was in the 82nd and first the 504th. Then 96 to 2001, I was in 7th Special Forces Group as a 18 Charlie. And then from 2001 and 2000 until 2011, when I retired, I was out at the unit. So I ended up doing 12 deployments, 40 total months time in combat, and then I retired.
One of our writers here at SOFREP, George Hannon, was over in the unit. I don't know if you know George.
I know who he is. We didn't work together, but I definitely know who he is.
Yeah, George is quite popular. He writes some great stories, and he just published a book, so I look forward to reading that one soon. But let's talk about you. After all this time in the military, obviously you had some problems of your own. Can you get into that a little bit?
Absolutely. So for me, fortunate or unfortunate, I consider it fortunate. I struggled with alcohol and alcoholism at a young age, and I ended up getting sober whenever I was 22 years old, when I was in the 82nd. So the majority of my military career, I didn't drink, and I am not the alcohol police. I am not, like alcohol is a huge part of our community. It's a huge part of our culture and what we do, and don't have any problem with it. But if alcohol is destroying your marriage or destroying your family or destroying your career, as being a soldier, then I got a problem with that, and you should too, So I just want to be very clear that I'm not a teetotaler, I couldn't spend 18 years in Spec Ops with that kind of attitude, so.
No, it's tough. Alcohol is a big part of our winding down, I guess is the way of putting it.
Yeah, for me, I just, I was one of those guys, that you would, get all lit up one night and do like insane things, and you'd say, yeah, man, hey, bro, you probably shouldn't drink, and because that's what I always say as, I'm allergic to alcohol. I break out in handcuffs. So it's so anyway, alcohol did not agree with me, and so I got sober. I had to get some help and got sober, but the thing was, it just made me a more incredible soldier. For me anyway. Again, not pushing it on anyone. It was what I needed to do, and then so that was a big part of the story, especially when it comes to whenever I got out, but also. Whenever I was in, especially, from 2001 to 2010, when I was still deploying, in 2006, I got a undiagnosed TBI, during those time frames. everybody was
Sure.
getting blown up. It wasn't uncommon. I mean, it wasn't like, oh my God, I got blown up. Maybe I should get checked out. It was like, oh, I'm finally in the club now, I guess. And but it was significant, and I didn't know it at the time. I ate a 82 millimeter mortar round, probably about 20 meters away. It was yeah. So that's where I got it, and that was 2006. So I kept deploying, and working around a lot of explosives, a lot more concussions and everything. And now we know that stuff is non-linear. It's not incremental. So I had some pretty significant TBI going on, and I had a fair share of post-traumatic stress, or what I just like calling unprocessed trauma. And so that got me into a really bad way come 2010. And so I'd never planned on getting out of the military. Man, I was a freaking super lifer. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, from the time I was old enough to remember, I was that 10-year-old kid running around with my Vietnam vet uncles, U.S. paratrooper, death from above T-shirt on. I mean, it was just, so I never, 30 years, wherever they were going to have to kick me out. But between the PTS and mainly the TBI aspect of it at that time, I ended up getting med boarded out because of multiple reasons. The normal broken parts, back surgery, broken back, I mean, we all got our list of things,
Same happened to me. I got med board out in '98, so.
Yeah, so it was, it was really rough. Everybody talks about the transition, and a transition out of any profession for when that's what you spent your whole adult life doing, is a big deal, especially the one we were involved in. And but I mean, I was in a bad way. I ended up going to the TBI clinic here on Fort Bragg and got tested, and so the kind of a cool thing, I guess you can say it cool with brain trauma, but when I took all the tests, that's 6 hours worth of testing with puzzles and with a person, and it's so definitive. It's not subjective to who's reading it. It's definitive. And when the doc who was reading it to me, he said, "Hey, you're operating at 50% processing speed. You're operating 50% verbal memory." So my symptoms at that time was like at times I wouldn't even know where I was. I used to drive, for 10 years straight, from the back gate to my house is about 3 different turns. And, I did it, twice a day for 10 years. But at that time, 2010, no iPhones yet, but I'd have to plug in my GPS, my address to get home, because I would just...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, I was cognizant, and you really wouldn't know what was going on in the old squirrel cage. I presented as if, like, okay, maybe a little angry, a little mean, but, normal dude. I had huge mood swings going on, and just a lot of the typical symptoms that were TBI, but I didn't know it. So when the doc read me those results, he kind of thought I was having a little bit of a moment, because he stopped a second and he said, "Hey, I just want to make sure you understood what I just said to you, And I was like, "Hey, doc, no, I hear you. I understand. Brain injury's bad, and 50% processing, 50% verbal memory." I was like, "But you just told me I wasn't crazy," and that was a huge thing to me, because I thought I was just losing losing it, And so I understand injury, and you can recover from injury, but you can't recover from crazy. I mean, we don't, And so when he told me I had an injury, yeah, it sucked. It was my brain, but man, it gave me a lot of hope, So I ended up doing, like the full gamut, 3 months, 3.5 months of intensive cognitive therapy, vestibular therapy, psychological therapy. Even had to get a little bit of it on meds for a little bit. And the crazy thing about all that is that it works. But one of the key things for me, well, a few key things, it was man, I just started getting after it like I would in the military. I wasn't happy about getting out, but it was real. You know what I mean? Hey, it was realistic. I couldn't wear kit without taking narcotics, and that wasn't going to happen. So it was like, hey, I just had to deal with what I had. So I attacked this whole healing kind of aspect of things the same way I did sniper school or ranger school or the Q course or selection. You know what I mean? It was just like, hey, what's next? What can I go to next?
Right.
So I just adopted that same mindset because it was like any other of those tough military schools, man. It sucked. There was a bunch of guys from group. We were in there in vestibular treatment. That's where you look at stuff and shake your head, and they'd just have puke buckets, next to you, and we'd all just. It was like on a screwed up team party or something where, you know what I mean? It's like you do all these crazy tricks until you puke, and then you can do it more, but anyway, got through all that. But man, I'm here to tell you, for me, the only thing that really stopped me from being, one of the 22 suicides was is I didn't have that trifecta. I didn't have the chemical dependency or self-medication thing going on. And I'm not saying that because of whoa, yay, me. I'm just saying it that I barely made it through without that. So I can only imagine, folks that are self-medicated. You throw a bunch of pills on top of some TBI, on top of a bunch of unprocessed trauma, and then just add booze, that's how it happens. I mean, we all know guys, and,
Yeah, and some of them were people we would consider the strongest guys that we were around.
Absolutely, man. But that the thing that I learned, obviously I learned a ton through that whole process, and and I have to mention too that the hugest part about me, and it's always been my motivation, was my family. You know what I mean? I've got this Spartan queen of a freaking wife who's way more badass than I am. I got 2 boys, that are young men now, but that's what kept my fire going, was, hey, I gotta, now my team wasn't, ODA, or wherever. It was my family, that was my team. So, hey, I don't want to let my team down. So, hey, I gotta freaking perform. Yeah. So it was different categories, but same things. And, man, I learned so much through that whole process of, hey, number one, how hard it is to do it. But then that is totally doable. But I got to have mission, and I have to have purpose, all the stuff we grew up with, which just made us be able to accomplish. But it was, man, it was freaking tough, But the other thing that got me through that I want to mention was the CARE Coalition, SOCOM CARE Coalition. Because, man, those guys had to, at times they had to assign someone to me where I mean, I'm not kidding, hand carrying me through my appointments and the med board process, because I had all these cognitive, executive functioning things going on, so, and it was very, it pissed me off, because I would know that, I knew how to do something very simple, like find room 107, at Walmart. But man, I'd spend 2 hours running around the hospital, and just not. So, I mean, they hand carried me through a huge part of the process, anyway, I can go on and on about that, man. But it was just, the biggest thing I'm trying to say to that is, yes, I had the willingness, to walk through the doors and sign up and volunteer to do all this shit. I mean, I'd rather you get in a fucking gunfight, man, than talk to a psych or,
Right.
do all that other crap. But I volunteered, and just got to continue on with it,
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I think a lot of the guys that I've talked to with this, they've said the same thing. I'd rather get in a gunfight being outnumbered 10-1 than to talk to a doctor. I'm the exact same way. I was actually at the VA this morning, so I'd rather get a root canal than go there. But we have to go.
Yeah, and that the thing is, man, it's a cool thing that I learned is that, and I'm talking about the 80% rule. There are complex psychological issues, like schizophrenia, bipolar, you know what I mean, multiple personality. Like, but the 80% of the folks that are, you know, pretty dang functionally just having a hard time, man, is trained or untrained. Like, I had not received any training in how to process trauma and handle my emotions that didn't include violence. You know what I'm saying? You know, I had the violent, you know, that piece down. You know what I mean? It's why we were good at it. You know, and but I just make it make sense to what I understand. It's just like when I showed up to the 25-meter line with my pistol for the first time, and I'm trying to shoot bulls. You know, I'm not even hitting the target. You know, and then instructor walked up, hey. When's the last, you know, I'm like, man, I can't even hardly hit the target. It's like, well, when's the last time you received training on shooting 25, you know, bulls at 25 with a pistol? I was like, well, I never have. And it's like, well, then doesn't it make sense that you suck, you know? I'm like, well, yeah. And it's like, so then we receive training and then we put it into practical application and we get better. And what I've found, man, is that same thing that we've lived our whole military careers with holds true in mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Like, dude, it's just like the gym. I can watch videos about going to the gym. We can talk about going to the gym. I can make plans about going to the gym until I start lifting those heavy things up a bunch of times. Like, ain't shit happening, man.
No, that's it. It's funny you mentioned going to the range because I you know, brought back a memory. In the old days at Montlake, they bring you out. You shoot a 25-meter target the first day, and they had you put your name on it, take it down, and then at the end of training, they'd get you out there one more time, and you shoot it, and then they'd bring out the first one, and they would compare notes and say, "Did you learn anything?"
Yeah, it appears so. Yeah, man, and that's how, you know, there's all these stigmas and all this stuff on, and I'm not talking about being weak and all that. Like, people are going to think what they think, and that's okay. You know what I mean? But the thing is, it's not all this voodoo, like, whoa, or some kind of hippie crap. You know what I mean? It's like, no, man, it's like, hey, I mean, if I had, you know, I mean, we do it all the time in whatever the category, man. If we needed radio training, you know what I mean? And there was an outside source, we would do it. If we needed driver training, if we needed advanced marksmanship, you know what I mean? We always sought to identify NCO stuff, you know, identify my strengths and weaknesses, you know what I mean? And then, okay, how am I working on that stuff? You know, it didn't make me weak to know that I sucked at shooting a rifle, you know what I mean? It just meant I needed some training. Now, if after the training I still sucked, well then I just suck, you know.
Yeah.
But they just throw all that voodoo on, you know, whether it's emotional health or mental health or even spiritual, you know, it's all these different things. It's like, nah, man, like, just like, again, I always go back to what most people can understand in our community, and that's, you know, physical fitness. Hey, some guys geek out on CrossFit. You know what I mean? Some guys were all Olympic lifters. Some guys are doing curls for girls, you know what I mean? Like, who cares at the end of the day if you can move your body with all your gear the way it needs to move? No one really cares, you know? So who cares, you know what I mean, if I see a psych or I do some 12-step program, or I don't know, singing bowls and all kinds of stuff, whatever. I mean, who cares, man? Look at all the weird shit we did with shooting and stuff. All the little idiosyncrasies and stuff. And
everyone had their own system.
I know. I touched my helmet 2 times before I draw, you know, what?
Yeah. You know, I remember as a kid, we all watched Gary Cooper and Sergeant York and have to lick that front sight post. So, yeah. So, how did you come about creating what the other founders, Warrior's Heart?
And I definitely, man. And it goes back to a critical thing. It sounds like, no, you'll understand it, but it's when I was in the 82nd, after I was 2 years in, I had my platoon sergeant, you know, and back in early 90s, there was a lot of Vietnam vets still in, you know, my platoon sergeant was, I mean, the whole battalion was stacked with these guys that were in books, you know, and But my platoon sergeant, you know, I had gone like to Ranger School, I'd gone to PODC, you know, so all the, I mean, I was just this rock star, right, in my own mind, and I come back from PODC, you know, and my platoon sergeant says to me, he said, okay, so what's the job of an NCO? Like, what's that all about? Of course, man, I just got out of PODC, like I'm like. Mission and health and welfare of the troops. He's like, yeah. What does that mean? He's like, well, mission, self-explanatory, who, what, where, when, why. He's like, what does health and welfare of the troops mean? And I start talking about, well, I got to know if they're married. I got beans and bullets. And he's like, no, jackass, that's not what it means at all. And I was like, I gave him all the book answers. You know what I mean? I just said. And he said, what health and welfare of the troops means is that you give them the ability to survive and thrive in combat. That's what that means. And I was like, wow, that ain't nothing that I've been hearing about, you know. And
Not PLDC.
Man, and it changed my whole life as a leader from that moment on, you know, in the infantry, on ODA at the unit, is that my job, you know, was ensure them to be able to survive and thrive in combat, which is just all about training and experience, as we know. So back to your question. So that was how I spent my whole military career. And then whenever I got out, because of my own personal experiences and some friends that I had, you know, I got really involved in veteran suicide. And, you know, me and a buddy of mine, Magnus, started Elder Heart, which became Mission 22. And but my sweet spot was always the chemical dependency route, you know, because that's something that I've just been hugely passionate about from the moment I got involved with it. Even my whole time in the military, I was super active with it. And so then whenever I got out, I needed a new mission, right? Okay, so my mission was my family and then my job. And then there was health and welfare of the troops, you know. So it's like, okay, I did the war overseas, you know, now there's the war at home. Which claims way more than the war overseas did, and so it's real, not pretty, you know, not fancy talk. And so my job, same as before, health and welfare of the troops, you know. So I was really involved in doing that, in speaking about my own experiences, not giving them many opinions, because what I found is you can, and we all know, is like, hey, you can argue with my opinion, but you can't argue with my experience. Because it's what happened, exactly. You know, and so I got really involved in that. And then whenever I met my partners, Josh and Lisa Lannon with Warriors Heart back in 2013, I met him at doing a little fun and gun just right down in Hoffman. I was just I was just doing gigs, trying to make money. He was a dude that, you know, wanted military type training and came there, and we met in the woods in Hoffman.
Yes, I saw he he doesn't have a military background, so I was wondering how you guys met.
That's how we met, man. So that's how Josh and his wife Lisa, they're a combo, and obviously in life, but also in business. And that's how we met. And he was him and his wife Lisa. They had run private drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers for 15 years. High quality, high level of care, but all to civilian population, you know. And when I met up with them, their next one that they were going to build, which was going to be their 7th one, was just going to be for veterans, because they had a counselor of theirs whose son that was a 2-tour Iraq vet who ended up, you know, taking his own life. So it brought it to their awareness, like, hey, we have to do something. So we met in the woods. It was kind of like the old thing. I was like, hey, you want to go do karate in the garage? Yeah, you know. So 2013 we met. We had time finding the property, working all the stuff out. We got the ranch in 2015, acquired it, and then in 2016 we opened up Warriors Heart in April of 16. And you know, and since then we've treated almost 2,000 warriors have come through there.
Wow, that's amazing. And what made you pick this area outside San Antonio?
So a few reasons. Number one was geolocation, the center of the U.S., because we knew we'd have folks coming from all over. And then in Texas, of course, just because it's very pro-military, pro-law enforcement, firefighter, there's just a lot of support there. So those were the two main reasons that initially got us into that AO to look in. And then, and then we found the ranch there at the time was called Purple Sage Ranch in Bandera, Texas. So that's kind of what got us there for those different reasons.
Good. And what's the program like there? I know I watched a couple of videos. You guys call it like basic training.
Yes. The thing is though, I got to clarify that though, because nobody wants to go back to basic training. You know what I mean? So the overall the program is it's a 42-day minimum 42-day inpatient healing/training facility. Primary diagnosis is chemical dependencies, with secondary is co-occurring PTS, mild traumatic brain injury, moral grief and injury, and the rest of the alphabet soup that comes, with our professions. So that's what it is there. And a couple main, it's like, okay, why is it different than any other place? There's a few different reasons. One of the reasons is that it's the opposite of a hospital setting, because folks like us and that come from our professions, we don't get well in hospitals, unless we're getting surgery, or something. But it's just not an environment that we do well in, So it's the opposite of that setting. It's more of a resort type setting, 543-acre ranch. It was an old Conoco oil executive retreat at one time. And then the other thing is the population, which creates the peer network immediately. So the population at Warriors Heart is active duty military, veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs. Basically, those who face life and death on a daily basis as a profession, is who's qualified to come to Warriors Heart. So that immediately gives us that peer network that everybody talks about, right? Oh, how we know how important a peer network is. And although a stateside EMT and a combat veteran's physical experiences may have been very different, the things that are eating us up inside are exactly the same. You know what I mean? It's the shit, people that we lost, the stuff that happens, the stuff that goes wrong. So whether that was in Baghdad or Detroit, you know what I mean? Those are the same kind of things that are going on inside. And so that the peer network is a huge thing. And then another main thing is that a lot of these healing centers or treatment centers, whatever, training centers, whatever you want to call them, they're very siloed off. It's like, hey, if you got chemical dependencies issues, you go here. But when you're here, don't talk about that war stuff, that trauma and stuff, like, hey, we're talking about this. And then if you go to some place for PTS, they're like, hey, we're not messing with the, medication issues you have going on. So because it always comes up is like, is it the trauma that drives the drinking and drugging, or is it the drinking and drugging that brings up the unprocessed trauma? Who gives a shit? Like, treat both of them, and then it doesn't matter. It mitigates the risk of misdiagnosing one or the other. So that's what we do out there. We treat the chemical dependency side, and we also treat the unprocessed trauma with licensed professionals. So,
yeah, I wanted to jump backwards for a second. I watched the film, and it talks about 9/11 and first responders, and it's not just the kind of guys we grew up around, warriors in this sense. But do you get a lot of first responders and police involved in the program?
We do. We fluctuate between, it's usually heavier on the military, whether it's active duty or veteran side, probably about a 60-40 split. It fluctuates throughout the times. And it's probably, and the numbers are getting bigger with our law enforcement, which is great. But it's about that 60-40 split between military background. But, a lot of our firefighters and our law enforcement are also veterans, because that's a general route that, especially young veterans take, is that, so they're kind of both of them. But yeah, we've had a lot of, back to the 9/11 piece, we've had several guys even from that area that worked what they called the pile, back then, that have come out because, like I said, those professions, create certain circumstances, and, when it comes to post-traumatic stress, a lot of guys are, embarrassed about that, especially if they're struggling or they don't want to admit it. It's like, hey man, we should have a medal for that. You know what I'm saying? Because that means that you've voluntarily chosen a profession that puts you in a situation of trauma, where like, hey, some crazy stuff was going on, some horrible stuff was going on, whether it was a burning building, a burning car, whether it was a gunfight, whatever that was. It's like, whoa, it's like you got PTS, like, hey, welcome to the club. Now you finally done something. You know what I mean? It's like, so it's just, I'm not about, especially all of us at Warriors Heart, we're not about fighting stigmas and all this stuff, but we are about changing the narrative. It's like, hey, it's kind of the wrong narrative, where it's like, hey, it's not a negative thing. Like, it's not something you'd volunteer for. Like, man, I can't wait for the day that I, need PTS therapy. You know what I'm saying? But man,
nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them.
No, man. But we know if you're in the profession long enough, like, it's guaranteed to, because those are rough jobs, and that's another thing that makes a very significant difference when you're talking about. They label it PTS, but let's just call it unprocessed trauma. Stuff that has gone on in our lives that, hey, it's just stuck. And we just go on through it. There's two categories of that, victims and volunteers. So victim is just what it means. You know what I mean? Hey, someone received something. They got abused. They got attacked. Something happened. They unexpected. They're a victim. But then you got volunteers like us, right? Like, we volunteered to put ourselves in a position where trauma occurs. So the end results is the same. We got unprocessed trauma, but the approach to healing is much different. If you try to treat me like a victim, like that's not going to work. But if you try to treat me as someone that volunteered to put myself in here, but we still need to do all this talking to the doc and writing and process and stuff, I can in training, like I can grab onto that kind of that message. I can grab onto that. But you start talking about that, hey, I'm a victim and it wasn't my fault and those kind of things. It's like, it's just not true. So that's another thing. And you're going to have to stop me along the way because I just get excited about it and I'll just keep running my mouth, man. So
go right ahead. That's why we have you here.
Yeah, but it's, and with all the different things that we do out at Warriors Heart, because we're state licensed, right? So, we have our alcohol and drug rehab 101 things that we have to do, right? But then we got a lot of leeway as far as what to do. And another thing that makes Warriors Heart different than any other one is that that's my job out there, is to provide warrior oversight. So my job description out there is like, I am the population. You know what I mean? I understand the chemical dependency aspect. I understand the PTS. I understand the TBI piece of it. And so I know, how much they can handle. Because, the psychologists want more psychology, as they should, right? Because they're passionate and rock stars in their profession. The docs, they want more medical, right? And they should. But at the end of the day, I always go back to like what we used to do in a talk. Hey, you have your intel guy, you have your ops guy, you have your S4, you have all these different subject matter experts. But at the end of the day, there's a warrior there that's saying, okay, I need your information and I need what you have the ability to do, but this is how we're going to do it. Right? And so, and that's what we do out there, because what I've seen in the warrior class of folks, the problem solvers, right? House is on fire, please come help me. They figure out how to put your freaking house out of fire. Hey, our country gets attacked. We go and get, problem solving. And that's how we're wired. That's what we do. But yet when it came to our own problems, like combat PTS, TBI, what did we do? We said, Sykes, fix us. Chaplain, fix us. It doesn't even follow a warrior trainer logic. It'd be like going to the intel guy and asking him what he thought about an operational decision. Now he's going to do the best that he can, but he's an intel guy. Same thing if I went to my ops guy and said, hey man, I want you to run this intel report. And he's like, okay. He's going to rock it out and it's going to suck, compared to the intel guy. Right. So that's where, that's all that we're doing, is we're just getting back to the way that things, we need our psychs. We need our docs. We need our chaplains and everything. But at the same time, these are our problems. Like we have to own what's going on in our own population, and then seek subject matter experts. Just like we did in every single talk there ever was, or MSS, or So right. That's one of my jobs out there, is to provide that warrior oversight. And I'll pause there for a minute. I'll keep talking.
It's okay. Yeah, it's funny because, we're not good at taking care of ourselves and our own problems. We're so focused on taking care of everyone else's. And, I spoke with the therapist at the VA who treated a lot of SF guys and Navy SEALs. So she was very, in tune with our environment. And she goes, without, trying to put everyone in the same box, she said, a lot of you guys would just take what happened to you and you put it in a box and put it behind you because I'll fix that later. Right now I need to fix this. And she said, and then you keep getting more boxes, putting in front of that little box, and then it comes out, at the very end, there's no more room left.
Yeah.
We need to get back to that first box and empty it out.
Yeah, man, because when that warehouse or those boxes, when that place gets full and it comes spilling out, ooh, that's ugly. that's and that's
all been there.
Oh, absolutely, man. Yeah, but that's to me because how I try to teach guys, because it's how I was taught about this kind of training, is that it goes back to what I understand. What I understand is I don't give a shit about letting me down, but I'm not going to let you down, right? Team guy mentality. Like, I will sacrifice myself for the team. But at the same time, I'm not going to be the weak link on the team. Like, I'm going to be hitting the range. I'm going to be hitting the PT. I'm going to be taking care, even though we didn't. It's kind of a big trick, is what I know about me because you hear him talk about this concept of self-care, right? And intellectually, I get that. In my heart, I don't, because I'm a team guy. Like, I'm more focused on others. But what I learned, even on the ODA, is that, man, I have to keep myself strong in order to be there when the team needs me. I have to stay proficient in my language. I have to stay, in all these different mental tasks that I've got to be able to do. Like, hey, man, I have to know how to do those things, and stay proficient on them. So if I look at it the same way, my life now outside of the military, as a civilian, I can't be any different. I've tried to be different before. You know what I mean? It ends horribly. It's like I'm wired, I'm wired how I'm wired. And but I was taught how to live the way that I am in this environment, and that is that the way that I learned that self-care piece is by knowing and accepting that, man, if I don't do what I'm supposed to be doing for me, when the team needs me, I'm not going to be there for them. Like, I understand that, and but now my team is my family, my extended family, other warriors. It goes back to that health and welfare of the troops for me. Like that's, hey, why do I get up in the morning? Why do I still go to therapy? Why do I still get TBI treatment? Why do I still go to physical therapy? It's because people need me to do it, man. Like, people need me to be around. Like, not that I'm something great by no means, but there's a handful, at minimum, a handful of folks that kind of depend on me.
They believe that you are.
Yeah. So that's where, again, man, it was, and that's why I really understand, guys, a lot of guys have a lot of struggles, of putting down the military, and the one piece, this is just for me, well, it's for more, but I'll say it's for me. It's like I had to accept the fact, man, that was over. I was no longer in the military, like for real. You know what I mean? I mean, not in my mind. I still think militarily. You know what I mean? I still believe what I believe, but like that door is shut, man. It's like talking about whenever like high school football or something all the time. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. It's a rude shock that first morning when you wake up and it's not there anymore. And, especially guys like us who get medically chaptered out, it happens like that. And when you're sitting there, I mean, if you're going to retire on a certain date, you kind of get it in your mind. When you get chaptered out, you're in the military one day, you're out the next, and that's it. And it's a rude awakening that first morning you wake up and you're like, what the hell am I going to do with the rest of my life now?
No, man. Well, I've been out, 10 years now, and those days still roll around sometimes. It's like, way not as bad as early on, but then again, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can't be, in my mind anyway, you can't be that passionate and that all in on something for decades, and then unwind that, a year or two or 10 even, outside of it. It's like, hey, it's gonna take a little bit of time. Like that'd be normal. You know what I mean? It's like, especially then you talk about all the crazy stuff that we did. It's not like a normal job or something.
We weren't normal people.
No, and we still aren't. It's not, that has not changed. We just, again, I go back to, I am well trained, because man, I'll always want to blow crap up, man, and get bad guys. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's America. You know what I mean? That's just, I'll always want to do that.
We were running a training program once, and General Downing came out with us. We were teaching him how to blow railroad ties and the rails. And so the guys were, putting their little charges on these sections of rail, and General Downing's like, hey, Chief, give me some of this stuff. And he goes, I don't care how old you get, you mix explosives with a bunch of young guys, SF guys, and you just want to blow shit up, and that's all there is to it.
Because it's great. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. So what's next now for Warrior's Heart?
Yeah, so we're going along strong. We've had COVID, right? Everybody talks about COVID, right? So last year, that's something that's going to be part of our lives. But again, back to health and welfare of the troops is, what we know for sure is alcohol and drugs will kill our folks way quicker than COVID will. Not minimizing what COVID is and the effects of it, but just triaging it. What's going to kill you first? It will be alcohol and drugs. So throughout the whole pandemic, we've stayed open, which is a huge, super proud of that. There was times when we've had to cut our numbers back to create space for isolation feed, but we continue treatment. We shifted to telehealth. We shifted to do all these different things. Again, back to the lay of the land, you know what I mean? Until we get it all cleared out, and then we'd come back. But it's part of our lives, so we gotta deal with it, and we have. So what's next for us, number one, is that we won't stop doing what we're doing. You know what I mean? We're going to continue the mission no matter what is going on. So that's the number one thing. Number two is, we're always in the process of growing. So even on the ranch, we've got a lot of space out there, and we're building, like, if what we have now is the level 1, it'll end up having a level 2, because some guys need some more training and a little extra training. Just like any hard military school, you got folks that come there that are ready, and they make it straight through, and they just go on and do wonderful things, right? You got some folks that come out, maybe they retest, a thing or two, and then you got some folks, well, maybe they need to recycle, you know what I mean? And then you got some folks that, hey, they just didn't know what they were getting into yet, and they'll come back at a later date. So that's the same kind of mindset that happens out there, and eventually, the goal would be, is to have multiple sites. That's part of our big vision and goal, because the population is so, we're talking about at minimum hundreds of thousands of guys and gals, that are suffering from this. And, so unfortunately the demand is, is super high. But, we're just gonna keep doing what we've always done.
So, how can people get involved with what you're doing, and if they are interested in a program there, how can they go about that?
Yeah, so the best way to go to see all of that stuff is warriorsheart.com. So I just chunk it out in the categories. Like, if people want to be involved, the greatest thing, most of our guys and gals that show up as clients at Warriors Heart, that come up through the training program, they had never heard about us before. That's almost, 90% of them is like, until that moment they were looking, they had never heard. So if there's one thing that anyone can do for us, is just help promote, to help promote Warriors Heart, whether it's in whatever capacity that is, whether it's in a conversation or social media or whatever it is that they feel comfortable with doing. And, that's always the number one thing. Another good way of doing it is, we just had that documentary out, it's Warriors Heart, Warriors Healing Warriors. It's on Amazon. We had to put a price on it, so it's 99 cents. They were streaming it on Prime, but I don't know, they do different things, but that's another good way. And then whenever it comes to folks, loved ones or friends, or folks that do need to reach out, like, hey, they need some more training, they're in a tough spot. On that warriorsheart.com, there's going to be a phone number on there. And on that phone number, you can call that, and you're going to talk to an admissions advocate. And we don't use pretty words for that, but immediately that person is going to start advocating for the individual or for the loved one or for your buddy. And even if it's just questions, even if you just, like, those folks that we have on the team there, they are subject matter experts in their field. So even if it's in, how do I approach my loved one in even talking about this, or hey, how do I get in? That is, trying to get back to your question of, like, that's the greatest thing folks can do with us is promote. And if there's any questions, just to call and talk with us. There's also, we have the Warriors Heart Foundation, where if some folks, if so inclined to donate, that help provide scholarships or hardships for our veterans, that aren't getting any benefits, that are on the streets, that aren't retirees or stuff like that. The one thing that I can say about Warriors Heart is there's not ever been anyone to not receive treatment because of money. It may have taken a little bit of a time, but everyone who has sought treatment, they've always got it.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that, because I don't think we do enough for our veterans, and I know we're kind of biased on that aspect because we come from that. But I don't think we do enough. I go back to my own father, who fought in World War II. I think all of those guys had PTSD. I think all of them did. And, he fought in Europe, and he was a tank commander, and, he liberated a concentration camp. And whenever something like that would come on, he'd walk out of the room.
Yeah. And And that was something that stuck with me my whole military career, was, like you said, seeing all of our heroes, the World War II guys, the Korea guys, the Vietnam vets. It was, I had these little windows of seeing into their world. Like, I think it was in 94 and 95, I jumped into St. Mary-Église, France, for the 50th anniversary, I think it was. And, back then, a lot of those old timers were still jumping and stuff, their square chutes. And, we were there in St. Mary-Église, and of course it was during the parades. It was all, that generation, especially, just how badass they all were. But then what would happen, man, as the night went on, I would see them, and they would be coming apart. And that's not a hit on them, but to your point of, like, a human being, unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath, like, you're going to have some struggles with what happens in combat, just as a human. And I watched those guys fucking come apart sometimes. And I thought zero negativity, obviously, about that. But where it stuck with me, it was like, hey, this is not going away. Like this whole kind of trauma, these things that kind of well up. Like, here these guys are, they're in their 60s or their 80s, and it's still popping up with them. So what that told me is how important it was for me to start dealing with it, for me to get some help if I needed it. And then I saw it with the Vietnam guys. I mean, I saw it in all these different places where it was, the underlying thing that I had in my mind is that, hey, this stuff doesn't go away. Like you said, we put it in a box and we categorize it, we compartmentalize it, and we have to. That's why we were really good at our jobs, right? That's why we can deal with those kind of traumatic situations, is because we can compartmentalize. But then there comes a time in life where it's like, okay, let's start kind of, as much as we don't want to, let's start unpacking those boxes. Because I'm here to tell you, man, I would like to lie to you and tell you that, man, I just enjoy going to therapy, and man, but I don't, and I don't, if it was up to me, like, I would just keep continuing to march, you know what I mean? It's like, that was in the past, but again, I have all these, I know it's not true, if I want to be there for my team and for my family, hey, I've got some work to do. But that's exactly how it was in the military, though, too, I mean, I didn't get on those teams that I was on because I hung out and wore cool sunglasses, and had big muscles or something. I mean, it was because now I worked my ass off. I mean? I earned my spot, every day. Like they always say, selection's an ongoing process. Guess what? It still is.
It only gets harder as it goes.
I know. I thought it would get easier. But it doesn't. No, the kids turn into men, and then the men require me to be a man and answer appropriately. Like, I got to be on my A game all the time now. It's horrible.
Yep. Well, Tom, thank you for taking the time with us this afternoon. We really appreciate it. Folks, Tom Spooner from Warrior's Heart. Check out, warriorsheart.com. We thank you for all that you do for our veterans, and if there's anything we can ever do for you on our end, please let us know.
I sure will, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again. Folks, thanks for listening and watching today. SOFREP Radio, on time, on target. We'll be back with another podcast real soon.